I just wanna take you to my place. We'll be alright, babe. Tonight is the night, baby. You can.
Good morning, everybody. It's Old Dark 30. Old Dark 30. We are on our way to the Cape Coast to see the slave castles. They wanted to leave at 4:30. And we were like, nah, we can't do that. No. So it's 5 o'clock. They compromised, gave us an extra half an hour. So the distance to where we have to go is, I think they say 2.5 to 3 hours. So yeah, see you when we get there. I'm at the slave castle in Cape Coast. Somebody's doing a music video here. Not sure how I feel about that. I guess because I don't understand what they're saying.
Officially welcome you all to the historical Cape Coast Castle. My name is Harry. I'll be your guide. The tour will take us about 45 minutes. But then before we start the guided tour of the castle, I'll give you a brief history about the castles we have in Ghana and in the transatlantic slave trade in Africa. In Ghana, there are 3 castles dotted along the coast of Ghana. We have St. George's Castle in Elmina Castle, built by the Portuguese in 1482. We also have the Christiansborg Castle in Osu, Accra, built by the Danes in 1661. And then finally, we have Cape Coast Castle, built by the British in 1665. Out of these 3 castles, Elmina Castle, or the St. George's Castle, that is the biggest and the oldest European structure in West Africa. Cape Coast Castle, where we are at the moment, that is the smallest among the 3. But the Cape Coast Castle itself was once built as a fort, known as the Carolusberg Fort, by the Swiss in 1653. Later, the Danes came in for the Swiss and then they took over the fort. The Dutch also came in, they fought the Danes and also took over the fort. Following the subsequent Anglo-Dutch War between the British and then the Dutch, the British also came in, defeated the Dutch, and then they took over the fort. So it was the British who developed the fort into castle as we see today. Cape Coast Castle, as it exists today, was built over a period of 300 years. Slavery in Africa, it all started at a time when the Europeans discovered the New World. When the New World was discovered, there were a lot of plantation farms, tobacco farms, cotton farms, mining areas, which they needed people to work in these farms. But then at the initial stages, they were using the white Indians or the Native Americans. But in these white Indians or Native Americans, they were not all that strong. They were dying out of tropical diseases. They need to get people who can work in these farms. So through recommendations, a Catholic bishop by name Bartholomew de las Cascas recommended Africans to the Europeans. European nations traveled down to Africa in search of human labor. But as they got to Africa, there was nothing like money for them to buy human beings. They had to introduce the better trade system, where they had to exchange human beings with imported goods like gunpowder, tobacco, second-hand clothing, smoking pipes, mirrors, and so many other imported items from Europe. But then the trading itself wasn't in Ghana only, but in the whole of West Africa. From wherever that these enslaved Africans were captured along West Africa, they would have to walk barefooted to the castle. But before they were brought down to the castle, they were first taken to Asan Manson slave market. That is where these enslaved Africans took their last African bath. From Asan Manson, others came in here, others too might continue the journey to the Elmina castle. It all depends on who went there to buy who. If it is the British, they moved down to this castle. If it is the Portuguese, they continue the journey to the Elmina castle. In the castle, the captives were being branded with branding irons because they were being bought by different slave masters. They introduced a branding iron. A branding iron is a metal. On top of the metal, the slave master has his name or has the company's logo on top of the metal. All they have to do is to insert the metal stick into fire till it gets very hot. Once they pick the stick from the fire, they place it straight on their chest, at their arm or at their back for easy identification. Of course, the branding alone is even enough to kill them. After that has been done, they were then separated. The men were kept in the male dungeon, whilst the women were also kept in the female slave dungeon. Why were they kept in dungeons? They were kept in dungeons because after the branding, ships were not ready for them to leave at that moment. They had to keep them in dungeons for weeks, for months. So basically, the dungeons served as a transit point for the captives to be transported to the Americas and the Caribbean. But of course, not everyone had access to the dungeon. Some of the captives got to the castle at the time the slave ships were already in. Immediately after the branding, there wouldn't be the need for them to be in the dungeon. Just after the branding, they were all marched to on board the slave ships. The trade officially ended in England in 1807, but then those of the British who were still in this very castle, they refused to end the trade in 1807. They rather continued with the trade till 1833 before it was finally abolished in this very castle. The trade lasted for more than 400 years, more than 4 centuries. So please, I'm going to pause for a while if there are questions to be asked before we start the talk. All right. So the whole of this area was known as the courtyard of the castle or the graveyard of the castle. A whole lot of people were buried within this very courtyard of the castle. But then there was an excavation work done in 1947. Only 4 of them were identified. The very first one in front of us is an African by name Reverend Philip Kwaku. Reverend Philip Kwaku was born in Cape Coast here in 1741, a native of this very town. During the time of slavery, Africa was known to be the white man's grave. Because of tropical diseases, most of the Europeans who came in here, they were all not surviving, especially the missionaries they brought along. What they did is to pick 3 boys, William, Thomas, and then Philip, to England to be trained to become missionaries. It was so unfortunate in England, William and then Thomas, they lost their lives in England. Philip studied in England alone. He was the first African to be ordained as an Anglican priest in England. Later returned back to the castle. He worked in here as a reverend minister and then also established the castle schools for the mulattoes. He died in 17th of October 1816. We were just standing just right in front of the male dungeon. Above the dungeon was a church, the first English church or the first Anglican church, sitting just above the male dungeon. So once Philip was up here preaching the word of God, fellow brothers and sisters were also enslaved in the dungeon. But then the big question we need to ask ourselves is that why should they even build a church on top of a slave dungeon? Whilst others were up there claiming they were worshiping God, there were others also in the dungeons dying and suffering. But in the remaining 3 we have here, they are all European graves. Please let's move closer to the grave. Whitehead. C.B. Whitehead died in 1812 at the time the Dutch and the British had confrontations and he was shot down. The third one is with Captain George Maclean. Maclean was a Scottish, born on 24th February 1801. He was appointed as a governor in 1830. Captain George Maclean worked in here for so many years. Very soon I'm going to show you an underground passage. The underground passage connects the male dungeon to the door of no return. But then it has been blocked for now. It was Captain George Maclean who ensured the closure of the underground passage in 1833. Maclean also succeeded in bringing the Fantis and the Ashantis together to sign a peace agreement not to fight again. Captain George McLean also established the first English court of justice in the country. It started up here. The door opened up there with a sign known as the Maclean's Hall. That is where Maclean established the English court. Maclean died in 1847. The very last one in the middle, a lady by name Letitia Elizabeth London, Captain George McLean's wife. Letitia traveled from England to this very castle to visit the Astor Reservoir. During the time of slavery, there was nothing like pipe-borne water in here. They had to create this open space down here. Whenever it rains, they would have to harvest the rainwater in here. That was the water they used for cooking, for bathing, for everything in the castle. But as I speak with you now, it has been connected to pipe-borne water, as you can see from this side. Sometimes you do open this tap to fill this water reservoir, so that whenever there is shortage of water. Listen to me first. I'll give you one time to take photos before we continue. Alright, so these are cannons. The round balls behind are also called cannonballs. Whenever there are unknown ships approaching the castle, all they have to do is to destroy them. They pick one of the cannonballs, insert it at the mouth of the cannon. At the bottom here, they place in the gunpowder and then they light it. As the gunpowder burns and then comes in contact with a cannonball inside the cannon, the ball automatically leaves the cannon. The balls are made with metal. During those days, ships were made with wood. One of the metal was any questions, please? Alright, if there's no questions to be asked, chamber held 200 men in each of them. They were not allowed to go out. They defecated, urinated, vomited in the dungeon. They sat and slept around their own mess. They slept on the bare ground. Others were sleeping on top of the others. The captives were made to lose feelings as human beings. The three walls up here, that is the only source of light and ventilation in the dungeon for the captives. Sometimes when it rains, depending on the direction of the wind, some of the rainwater comes into the dungeon and washes part of their feces through the trenches we see on the ground like a gutter. It leads to the ocean. The captives were fed twice a day, in the morning and in the evening, for whatever that it was given to them to eat was never meant to satisfy them, and it just sustained them whilst they were in here. There was nothing like light as you see now. The room was very dark. Being in darkness for a very long time, whenever they had opportunity to move outside, the sun rays affected their eye. Many of them became partially blind whenever they were exposed to the sun. Because they had to defecate, urinate, do all sorts of things in here, the end result was malaria, diarrhea, fever, dysentery. By the time the slave ships would be ready for them to move, many of them lost their lives in this very dungeon. In 1974, there was an excavation work done here. During the excavation work, they found chains, shackles, human bones. All the chains and the shackles you saw in the museum, they were all retrieved from this very dungeon. And after the excavation work, sample of the black sand you see on the ground now, sample of it was picked. They conducted a research on it, and then after the research, the result they got was that what you see on the ground now contains human feces, blood, vomit, leftover food, saliva, urine, sweat, human flesh that has been mixed up together, which it has turned into black as you see on the ground. Over in here, it is because of the excavation. These are bent bricks. These are supposed to be the original floor of the dungeon, not this. So on top of the original floor, all these are human feces, blood, vomit, covering the original floor of the dungeon. With the exception of the first chamber where we stood on the original floor, in here we are not standing on the original floor. All these are the remains of the captives. Alright, let's see very much. Because as you can see, this part of the chamber, it is naturally brighter as you compare to the remaining chambers because of this open space up here. At this very point, what they do in here is to separate the weaker ones from the stronger ones. The weaker ones will be kept this way. Doctors need to examine them for the stronger ones to continue with the journey. After the sorting has been done, the stronger ones wouldn't move back towards the main entrance. No, the stronger ones would have to exit the dungeon through an underground passage. Behind this very wall, there was an underground passage, very big and then very wide, about 80 meters from this very side. Only the stronger ones would have to make their way through this underground. They walk through till they get to the door of no return, where the women can join them, and then they move straight into the ships. But this underground passage, it has been blocked. It was blocked by the British in 1833. For that reason, we cannot move through this underground. But then we'll be able to see how big the tunnel is, where exactly the tunnel ends when we continue the tour outside. This is a shrine. Africans had not introduced Christianity to Africans. Africans had their own way of worshiping God. They worship God through natural things like stones, rivers, mountains, trees. It is their belief that as they pray or worship through some of these things, their petitions will get to their ancestral world, and then their ancestors will take their petitions to God. Why? It is all because they believe that the ancestors are more closer to God than any other person. That was the mode of worshiping in Africa. In Cape Coast here, we have 77 lesser gods in Cape Coast here. This is one of them. He is called Nana Tabe. This very shrine was here before this castle was built. After the castle was built, the British were denying our forefathers from worshipping from this side. They performed their sacrifice. They took this shrine from here to another place. Later, when the trade ended in the castle, the indigenous people in the town felt they need to bring it back to its original position. That is how come today we see a shrine in here. But when the captives were in here, the shrine wasn't here at that time. It was only brought back when the trade ended in the castle. And then finally, flowers were wreathed also in here. They were brought in here by Africans, African Americans. They brought them in here to pay homage to their ancestors, to our brothers and sisters who lost their lives doing the trade. They mostly bring these flowers in here during an African historical theater festival, Panafest, to examine them. If they get war, they will have to stay behind and wait for the next ship that is going to arrive. If they don't get war, they will still have to stay behind and they work in the castle as domestic slaves. In the castle, there are two types of slaves in the castle. They had the commercial slaves and the domestic slaves. The commercial light and ventilation in the dungeon. It was more like as you see now, the main entrance is shut down. When the main entrance is shut down, the place was very dark. You could imagine people being in here for 2 weeks to 3 months without moving out, defecating, doing all sorts of things in here. What is going to happen to them? Many people died in the dungeons. Those who died in the dungeons, rest in peace.
Amen.
Alright, this is a cell, but then it is not an ordinary cell, but a condemned cell. It looked as if the punishment in the dungeons wasn't enough. They still went ahead to create a condemned cell. Enslaved Africans who were brought to the castle committed no crime. Many wanted to escape from the castle. Many fought for their freedom. Anybody who was caught in that act was seen to be stubborn, aggressive, rebellious. They were all locked up in this very cell. Nobody went through the side and then came back alive. Less than 48 hours in here, they all lost their lives in here. So please let us move in. I'm going to explain to you why nobody survived in here. Please keep your heads down once you come. leading to this very side. The first two doors in the middle, it has been removed. Left to the last one. Even the last one, the door is still open. You can still feel the heat in here. You can imagine all the three doors are locked up. No food, no water was given to them. They were still in chains and in shackles. So out of suffocation and starvation, they all lost their lives in this very cell. Nobody comes in here and then goes back alive because of the conditions that existed in here. Any questions? So from here we'll see the end of the tunnel, but please remember, nobody entered the tunnel from this side. Nobody came out from the tunnel from this side. It was only an observatory. So please, you can have a look at it, but just be careful. We don't have a stairs in here. Be careful you don't fall. Please, all the kids should go back, please.
I don't know.
So that is the end of the passage, but then it has been blocked from this side also. The men would have to get in here, the women need to join the men and get this side to be the final exit into the ships. But then sometimes away from the sea was sometimes very rough. So this side was blocked up, and then after this side was blocked up, they later created the door of no return, where nobody went through that door and came back into the castle again. So very soon, we shall see the door of no return. I will explain to you why it is called the door of no return. But this side was this. Alright, so that is a female slave dungeon. Two separate chambers for the women. This side is the very first chamber. We have the second chamber opposite us. Each chamber held 150 women in each of them. They were also not allowed to go out. They defecated, urinated, vomited, had their menstruation in here. They sat and slept around their own mess. The three holes up here, that is the only source of light and ventilation in the dungeon. Please, do you remember in the male dungeon, I made mention of a drainage on the ground that carries away the liquid waste. In here, there is nothing like a drainage. The stench in here is something that I cannot describe. It can only be imagined. Very bad conditions for the women. Whenever the governor wants to rape any of the women in here, the governor comes with a servant. They stand right in front of the door. The governor looks through and then points at any of them. The servant comes in and then pick her out. She'll be taken to another place where she'll be given good food to eat, put on nice attire, take a nice bath. From there, she'll be handed over to the governor. After the governor has finished abusing her, she'll be brought in here back again. But then as time goes on, if they realize she's pregnant, they will still have to come for her. Doctors would have to examine and then take good care of her. 3 months after delivery, the governor takes the baby, the woman will be brought in here back again. If you're a lady in here and then you are not fortunate, on the way to the Americas, to the Caribbeans, if the soldiers in the ships get to know that they are pregnant women on board the ship, all they have to do is to offload all pregnant women into the ocean for sharks to feed on them. Why? It is all because they do not need pregnant women. Plantation owners are not going to buy pregnant women. For that simple reason, they were forced to throw all pregnant women into the ocean. Please, let's see the door for us. So, together with the soldiers, they were all abusing the women sexually. Any lady who refused to be abused sexually will be beaten up. From there, she belonged to India for a couple of days. A very huge metal gate covering the side. Food and water was only given to them through the side. There is an open space in here, that is where they had to defecate and then relate. Any lady who refused to be abused by the officials in the castle was locked in here.
Will they die?
No, just for a couple of days. Please, you can have a look at it. Alright, so that is the door of no return. Sure. Why is it called the door of no return? Because nobody went through this door. Nobody went through this door and came back into the castle again. At this very point, all hopes were lost for enslaved Africans. Enslaved Africans who went through this door lost contact with Africa. They lost their names, they lost their identity whilst they went through this very door. But then the door itself wasn't big as you see now. It was very short and then very narrow. Before one could even move through this door at that time, he or she needs to bow. Anytime you get the opportunity to visit the Elmina Castle, you will see the original door of no return. Very, very short, very narrow at the Elmina Castle. But please remember, not everyone who went through this door survived or made a journey successfully. Like I said earlier, the trade wasn't in Ghana only, but in the whole of West Africa. From wherever that these enslaved Africans were captured along West Africa, they would have to walk barefooted to the castle. On the way to the castle, some of them lost their lives because of inadequate food and water. Others fell into traps. Others were attacked by wild animals. Those of them who wanted to fight for their freedom on the way to the castle, the slave masters shot them down. Only few people made it to the castle. The few who made it to the castle too, the conditions in the dungeons wasn't the best. Many died in the dungeons. The few who survived the dungeons came out. They had to go through this door. They went through the door. They saw the Atlantic Ocean. They saw the ships. They never had an idea as to where they were taking them to. Some of them prefer to commit suicide on the Atlantic Ocean rather to be taken to unknown destination. Many people lost their lives when they went through this very door. So please, I'm going to open up the door. Let's move out there and see what is there.
I don't have a space with the first
Once they move out here, the ships were already parked out here. But where the kids are swimming now, it is very shallow from this side. Bigger ships were not coming closer. All the bigger ships would have to dock at the far end there. They convert the captains with smaller boats to the bigger ones, and then they journey. From Accra to Abanze, they traveled by road. And then from Abandu to this part of the castle, they decided not to continue the journey by road again. They will only continue the journey to the castle to the Atlantic Ocean. Why? It is all because the ancestors were taken to the Americas through the Atlantic Ocean. The ceremony was dubbed as the Great Homecoming. Let us not forget, the Black Americans are not white people. They are not from America. They are all from Africa. And it is because of the injustice that occurred in here. That is how country they found themselves in the Americas and the Caribbean. It was named as the door of return to welcome them back home whenever they wish for the freedom they will come back. They should do so. Basically, the two bones that was brought back is representing millions of Africans who left Africa and never returned back to Africa again. Later, the two bones were reburied at Cinnamon-Son, slave market, where the captains took their last African life. As the saying goes, there is no place like home. We need them back home whenever they wish or they feel they want to come back. We want to erase the idea of the door of no return. There is nothing like the door of no return. There is a door of return. It is for brothers and sisters in the diaspora to recognize this and then return back to the motherland again. That is how come this has been pasted out here. Anyways,
Papa.
all right.
Ah, smell that.
Papa.